All of us are waiting for something. We're waiting for dreams to come true, a business to sell, a business to start, a relationship, a promotion. But how do we wait well? How do we deal with that space in between today and the fulfillment of the dream? Well, my guest today, Charlie Watkins, is back for part 2 to discuss how he learned to wait well and how you can too. Let's jump in. Well, welcome back to the Intentional Leader Podcast, a place to be refreshed, renewed, and encouraged as you lead yourself, your family, and your team. I'm Cal, and this is part 2 of my conversation with my mentor, Charlie Watkins. If you missed part 1, I recommend watching or listening to that first. And in this episode, Charlie shares the difference between waiting and waiting well. Charlie is a leader of leaders. He's a CEO, husband, father, grandfather, and author of the brand new book, Throw No Rocks, A Man's Guide to Success Through Partnership with God. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon, and it will be officially released on September 10th. So without any further ado, please enjoy part 2 of my conversation with one of the wisest people I know, Charlie Watkins. I want to shift to waiting because every single person that's listening has had to experience the pain and the struggle of waiting for something. Maybe it's a dream that you have that you're just waiting for it to unfold. It's a vision you have for your business, or it's a vision you have for your family or your relationships that just, you can sense that there's something down the road that you are walking into, but there's still that long period between where you are today and where you know you can be. And so, and you've dealt with, and talk about it in your book, you talk about it in the book, Throw No Rocks, these 2 big seasons in your life. One was kind of a business season where you were waiting for a long period of time, and the other one was related to your health. So talk to us about these 2 seasons of your life and what we can learn about the difference between waiting and waiting well.
Well, they were very challenging, both very challenging periods for me, but they were both also even more ultimately life-giving. And the first one was really a period of 11 years between September 15th, 2008, and I'll explain why that's an important date in a minute, and early December of 2019. I was the CEO of one of Landmark's companies, now sold, a cloud computing company called Expedient, which was a regional player in several cities and a successful business. And I was the founding CEO of that, and we did a number of acquisitions, and then we grew it up, and we had it ready to be sold. In 2008, the Batten family, who is the family that owns the majority of Landmark and is the founding family, decided they wanted to sell all the businesses of Landmark, including its most prominent business, which was the Weather Channel, which we invented at Landmark and brought to market. We had Trader Publishing, we had newspaper. It was a media empire originally, and a very successful one. And so all these 25 plus businesses were going on the market. And what happened on September the 15th was the credit markets collapsed. And all deals, ALL, even across the United States, all came to a grinding halt. Anything that was going to be used, where debt was going to be used, because the debt markets collapsed. Well, we closed on the Weather Channel sale to NBC Universal on the Friday night before. That was September 12th, 2008. It's the only one of the Landmark businesses that got sold before the credit markets collapsed. Mm-hmm. The business I was running at the time had to be pulled off the market, as did all the other Landmark businesses. And so we went back to work, and we were getting ready. I assumed we would sell our company, of which I was leading, within a year or 2 when the credit markets got repaired. And what turned out to be an expectation of a 1 or 2 year wait turned out to be an 11-year wait. Mm-hmm. And the business was excellent. And it became apparent that it wasn't going to be sold at that time. And a number of very strange things happened in the marketplace that aren't important for this conversation. But I can tell you, I have a lot of experience in business. This was a good business sought by many, many buyers and many wanted to buy it and for many reasons couldn't buy it, either because they couldn't get this funding or that or this or all these reasons that were, when you add them all up, we just didn't sell it. So we went back to work along with all the other presidents within Landmark, building and growing our own businesses. This was a kind of a very difficult time for me because I really was ready to sell it and move on to something else. The Lord had dropped some deposits of some desires in my heart, which is the way he works. You should never just dismiss the desires of your heart. And they were growing, and I was ready to move on. I mean, we had made a decision. We were in an active sale process when this thing got pulled back off the market. In fact, we changed the organization where my role was diminished, and we had elevated a guy below me to be the president. I was still the CEO. So I had a little bit less to do. My job was to help the business get ready to be sold again. And when that wasn't happening, I went back to the Lord eventually after trying to force it to happen, which is another lesson in itself, which I recommend no one try. Don't try to manipulate it and force it, because you'll do it prematurely and you won't get the best. Anyway, the Lord was gracious and refusing to allow me even to pull that off. So I went back to the Lord and I really prayed about this. I said, what am I supposed to do with this time? And the Lord gave me two very specific instructions. One was spiritual, one was physical. The spiritual one was, he said, start mentoring young businessmen who are waiting. And I said, maybe everyone's not waiting. I mean, what? Okay. So I started this little fellowship, downtown business fellowship in Norfolk, where we lived at the time. And I had these guys coming, and most of them were MBAs, mostly from Darden, from UVA and other places. And not all of them were MBAs, but they were all aspiring business leaders, executives, probably mostly in their 30s. You can relate to that, Cal. Mm-hmm. And I found out something about them. They were all waiting. Every single one of them. And so the story goes that we decided to wait together, and we decided to become experts on it. And so we read books on waiting on the Lord by incredible Christian masters, and we discussed this idea, and we worked through the struggles together of waiting on the Lord, and we changed waiting to waiting well, or what the Bible calls waiting on the Lord. Two completely different things. Waiting is an exercise in self-management. It's endurance. It's hardening your heart. It's just getting through. It's kind of hating it, but surviving. Waiting well, or waiting on the Lord, is an exercise in partnership with God, who says, while you're waiting on that thing, can we work on this thing? While you're waiting to be elevated to that role, can we work on preparing you to be a king? And so what God was doing for me was teaching me how to teach others. Well, and of course, I was the great recipient of the learning, to help these guys. And he said, also double down on your men's group at church. And so several of the stories that are in the book are from great experiences I had with the men in that group, where we did stuff together and tackled identity issues. And so I think the Lord just had a whole program of just get more grown up, Charlie, and do it by helping others grow during this season. And the second thing he encouraged me to do was to take care of my health and get more active. And so I took up the sport of triathlon. And if you can swim, you can do triathlon. And I was a swimmer. So I started racing triathlons and training, and I ended up doing 48 of them over 9 years.
Wow.
And I want to emphasize that this is a long period of changing your priorities. Meanwhile, we're still growing Expedient. We're still working on the business. I'm not divorced from it. I'm still the CEO, but I'm not the president. And that's a big difference, because I didn't have the day-to-day operational responsibilities nearly to the depth I had before. So I had a little bit of freedom relative to my schedule to pursue these other things. So the waiting on the Lord was an 11-year process that culminated in a successful sale of the business in December of 2019. And your business guys will understand, your business leaders will understand this, and anybody who understands basic math will, but the last deal that fell apart in 2008, the business would have been sold for $70 million, 70 million, right? That's a lot of money, isn't it?
That's a lot. Yeah.
When we sold the business in December of 2019, it sold for $791 million.
Gosh.
It won't be lost on you, but that is over 11 times more than the first number. It's not 12 times. It's more than 11. And I just think the Lord has a sense of humor. It was an 11-year wait, and we were able to make the business much more valuable, much bigger. And he prepared a whole management team with depth and maturity and wisdom. And the new buyers of the business, they didn't get rid of one person, including the CFO. They always get rid of the CFO, I always tell people. And they didn't get rid of the CFO. He's still there today. They kept everybody, and all they did was make it the head, and they acquired other businesses and put it on top of this business because the business had become what we call a platform business. Lots of embedded capacity, great growth opportunities, able to digest other acquisitions. So the business became strong. The leaders became strong. I became strong. But people hate to wait. We're a microwave society. We like our stuff fast. We don't even like it when there's 6 people in line at Chick-fil-A ahead of us. So this was important for me. It helped a lot of other people. And what I have found with leaders is you must underline, learn how to wait on the Lord, how to wait well, because everything that's good in life takes time. And God's best takes time. I mean, just remember, if you're a Bible scholar, Abraham waited 25 years for Isaac and then got tested again 12 or 13 years later. Mm-hmm. David was on the run for 12 to 14 years between the time he was anointed and became king of Israel at age 30, when he then reigned for 40 years and never lost a military battle. Think about the years that Jacob had to wait. There's always waiting about the great gifts, the great waiting. Jesus waited 30 years to begin his ministry. And you could say that, why couldn't he have started when he was 18? How about 22? There are a lot of young rabbis out there. Well, he was home until he was 30, waiting, building, growing, developing, studying the scriptures, preparing, working for his father in his carpenter shop. There are positive, wonderful things God has for men while they're waiting, and tapping into those is the wisdom of the experience that I want to encourage men with, because people hate to wait. And we've got to make waiting our friend, because if we don't, we're just going to be miserable, and we're not going to get the benefits of the preparation time for when the vision is fulfilled, when the elevation occurs, when the prayer is answered. So waiting on the Lord, that was the first one. The second one was much more intense, and it's a little period of time in the end of those 11 years, and it was really the years 2017 to 2022. Long story short, I had just finished my 48th triathlon. It was an international distance triathlon. For those of you who know triathlon, that's the Olympic distance. That's a 1,500 meter swim, a mile swim. It's a 40K bike, 25-mile bike, and it's a 10K run, a 6.2 mile. Took a man my age in my mid-50s about an hour and 45 minutes to do that. The 2 hours and 45 minutes, sorry. The rock stars could do that in about 2:30. I was pretty fast, but I wasn't at that level. But anyways, I was competitive, and I made the podium several times, and it was a good race. Well, I raced 2 of those in September of 2017, and one of them was my fastest time ever on a course I knew well in Virginia. And I was in great shape. I was at the pinnacle of health. I was doing all these other things with my men's group. I was growing. I was in a good place. And I developed a tummy ache, to make it long story short, and ended up having emergency stomach surgery for a stomach blockage. But the blockage wasn't your typical blockage. It was lymphoma. So this cancer had gotten into my stomach and had became a blockage, and they removed about 12 inches of stomach, and I had a visit from a doctor that night, the first night in the hospital, who I happened to know from the YMCA working out, a guy named Paul. And I said, Paul, what are you doing here? And he said, oh, it's that Charlie Watkins. I said, what, Paul? He said, I just read your chart. You have cancer.
Oh, my goodness.
You know, the stomach surgery left me with a big incision up the middle. I had tubes and wires all over me. 3 weeks before, I'd been on a podium after a triathlon. And I'll tell you what, I was so low that night. Blythe was there all day long, but at night it wasn't a happy place. And I went through a really intense experience with God. But I will just tell you this as it relates to the waiting. Like, we can talk about that if you want to talk about it separately. But that intense period wasn't even over yet. After I began to get healed from the cancer, I went through 6 rounds of heavy chemotherapy. I was promoted to CEO of Landmark. Frank Batten called me in his office and said, okay, you're healed. Will you take this job? And I'd been preparing for this job my whole life. I just didn't think it was going to be at Landmark. And so I said yes. Of course I said yes. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have said of course, but I went home and talked to Blythe about it. Frank said, take as much time as you want. I went home and talked about it. I said, Blythe, this is what the Lord's been preparing me for all these years. You know it. I just didn't think it'd be at Landmark.
Yeah.
So I came back and told him yes, and then I'm going to my follow-up appointments on my cancer, which is now completely in remission. Rear view mirror, doing great, starting to get into the routine with a new company. And oncologist says, you know, Charlie, you got this problem with your heart. We can see it in the images. You got this aneurysm that's, unfortunately, it's growing. And what ended up happening is I had to have an open heart surgery in August of 2019, just a year into being CEO. And there's 100 stories around that where the Lord provided amazing doctors and provision to get that paid for and all sorts of incredible things. But the bottom line was I had to have open heart surgery. I had to have a aortic valve removed, an aneurysm fixed. I have a mechanical valve now. And all that was done during this 5-year period. I had 2 retina detachments at different times occurring while I was on business trips that had to be repaired on an emergency basis. I had to have a hand surgery. All this occurred in a 5-year period between 2017 and 2022. And all I can tell you is the Lord showed me things during this time of suffering that I share with men. And we go through the lessons, and then it takes me back to the platform of assets and the things you put in place, and understanding your identity and being under authority, making sure you understand spiritual warfare, because you have to understand where these attacks are coming from and you don't turn your ignorant mind back against God. And so these were 2 very intense periods of waiting. One was a business wait, and the second was really a health and kind of a defining moment experience with God in the hospital when I was in there for stomach surgery, where he just got some things straight and said, can we settle this once and for all? I'll always take care of you. And I think it came from that old stuff, which was my dad was gone.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of guys listening right now, Cal, and their dads are gone, or their dads were gone, or they had difficulties with divorced parents. And I know you understand a lot of these things, and you've talked to men like this, but when he said to me, basically, can we just get this straight? Like, we don't have to mess with this ever again. Well, my prayers began to change. I never have to say, Lord, would you be with me in this? I just thank him for being with me. He said, we finished this, right? I said, oh yeah, we're finished. I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to go through this again. But it was a defining moment. It was like being given a different name, the way Jacob was, or Peter was when he was given a different name. It's this idea of a new mantle of authority, a new confidence, a new identity, or an additional feature to your identity that you didn't know has now been unearthed. So 2 times of waiting where I learned to wait well. The time during the chemotherapy, the 6 sessions of chemotherapy, was incredible and difficult, but very, very useful. Focusing on God, doubling down on learning to wait on the Lord, talking with men, but mostly listening because I was too exhausted to talk from the effects of the drugs. And so the periods of our lives where we're waiting are precious, and they need to be invested in, times of great depth of heart investment. And so that's what I try to help men do. And those were the 2 times that occurred in my life.
Wow. I can relate. I feel like for me right now, even with this intentional leader platform, it's like I have this big vision for it, but there's the daily doing. There's the daily working, the being diligent, being faithful. Even something as simple as, okay, I need to prep for this interview. I need to read this book. I need to edit this video or edit this podcast. It's like there's the big vision down the road, but then there's that moment by moment. And I think everyone's probably got something like that where you see the vision, you have the dream. It's not complete. And there's the in-between space. And both of those stories are incredibly powerful, and they're very encouraging. And I think that's one of the many reasons why it's so cool to hear you talk about these things, because you've actually walked through it. These are not theoretical examples. These are real examples from your life. Anything practical? I'm just thinking about the leader who's listening, who's probably resonating with both of these examples. Maybe they don't have cancer, but they can certainly relate to this idea of going through something painful, wanting to just kind of get to the other side of it, wanting to get to the end where you sell the company for way more. Anything practical that you would offer for, and I'm just imagining, Charlie, you know, the person who wakes up tomorrow morning and has to acknowledge to a certain extent that this dream is way down the road. Right. Like, this is not happening anytime soon. What do I do today?
Well, I would tell you this is a superb question because I get it a lot. And so I know the answer, or I have an answer.
Sure.
The first thing I tell men is don't abandon your dreams, because they're far off and they're big. And they don't like me sometimes when I say that, because they've already found a way to sort of package it down, bust it up, diminish it in smaller pieces.
Yeah, that's good.
Down.
Yeah.
And I say, don't do that. And they say, well, it's too hard to wait. It's too difficult. It's so impossible. And I take them back to the story of the loaves and the fish. And I say, God creates in us dreams that, apart from the gap of training and his multiplication, are impossible. You can't get them done. So give up on forcing it and embrace the things God is giving around the edges while he sets the stage for that day. But don't give up the dream. So I tell people to get very practical, get very tactical, do something healthy, reach out to others, How about in the area of the dream? This is what was so fascinating to me about the Lord saying, why don't you encourage other men who are waiting? And I said, I don't even think anybody's waiting like I'm waiting. And then all I had to do was ask some of my junior friends in the church and other places and said, hey, bring your friends, and this with bunch of Darden MBAs. And I said, well, this is why I'm here. And they said, well, I'm waiting for this.
Oh, wow.
Well, I've been promised this, but it hasn't come through yet. Well, my boss says everybody was waiting. And so I think the first thing is don't abandon your dream. The second thing is you're not alone. And get into a group of guys and let's start talking about this, because everybody's got great ideas on things that need to be done while we wait. And if we do it wrong, man, oh man, if we put the wrong inputs into this process, here's the danger. I tell men this. I say, look, I've tried this. The reason you don't want to put the wrong inputs, in other words, you don't want to force this, is because you'll get your dream, but it'll be a version of it. And it won't taste very good after a year or two. And then you'll have years of untangling it. And you'll have wasted all this time, because dreams, even if they're done wrong, take time to flourish into whatever they're going to be. Dreams that you do well take time to flourish into God's best for you. So focus on the inputs. Do things practically speaking, help other people, serve your wife, double down on your kids, take on the coaching job for Little League. Do something that requires something of you that may not be exactly what you'd like to be doing right now, but you're good at it, you can help people with it, and it'll help you be a little more detached from obsessing over that dream every day. But don't let that dream die. And that's the balance, I think, of waiting well versus waiting poorly, or just waiting in our own strength. And that's what I try to tell men every day. Those are the lessons.
Friend, I hope you're enjoying the episode. I want to take 1 minute to tell you about a product that I just created that I'm really proud of, and I think it can quickly help you get true clarity in life. In our 21st century social media comparison FOMO world, it's never been harder to cut through the noise and prioritize what matters most. But if you can get crystal clear about your deepest desires and how you want to spend your time, that clarity is a superpower in the world that we live in today. And that's why I created the Discover Your Core Values mini course. In this short on-demand course, I walk you through a proven process to help you discover your unique core values and how to make them practical for daily life. This course will make decision-making easier. It'll give you more courage, and it's going to help you have more peace as you say no to things that are not your highest contribution. And you get all this without having to buy a bunch of books or pour out your soul to a bunch of strangers. If you're interested, you can get immediate access at calwalters.me/course. There you can purchase just the course, or for a very limited time, you can purchase the course and a one-on-one coaching session with me. This is a great way to invest in your future. I hope to see you in the course this week. Now back to the episode. Yeah, and I see a lot of preparation that happens in that period. And I know for me, this is actually making me think of like the last several years for me, where I was really leaning into this podcast until about 2022, right around the time that Teddy was being born, our son. And I really felt like God was telling me to, and my wife was also telling me like, hey, I think you're going too hard. And a lot of that was out of this like just impatience of like, oh, I gotta go. And then it was like this, I felt this need to take a step back. And so I just took a step back for about a year where I only released several episodes. But it was amazing just by creating that space, how much I think God was able to do inside of me in some of the private spaces that needed to be worked on. And now I just feel like I'm approaching this entire thing from such a healthier place. But we've all seen leaders who get to a position and they're just not prepared for it. They haven't, the inner work hasn't been done. We all think that we are a little different. Maybe we could just short circuit the process. But I think what you're talking about is really powerful. So I just encourage, well, I'm sure you're already encouraged if you're listening to this, the idea of don't shrink your dream, don't give up on your dream, but also look for opportunities in that space in between for there to be some powerful inner work that happens and some preparation and some community building too. And I think that's a really important question. Well, Charlie, it would be a missed opportunity with you on this podcast for me not to get a little bit of leadership wisdom. And obviously we've been talking about that, but I want to ask, you've led for decades, and we're kind of landing the plane here a little bit, but you've led for decades in different contexts, CEO, you've obviously spent some time in the Navy, you invest in leaders all the time. I just want to ask you, what are one or two keys that you've discovered for leadership? What are some insights, maybe one or two that come to the top of mind that you would give to leaders today?
Well, I think if you get, this goes back to the platform, or at least one element of it, if you get a sense of your identity as a leader, in other words, you have a melding between those duties, all the things you could do in terms of style and emphasis as a leader of an organization, a team, a business, and what you're uniquely gifted for. If you get comfortable on the identity side, the question is very, very easy to answer. And so for me, the revelation of knowing who I am, I'm really a strategic encourager. That's what I am. I'm a coach of leaders. I help people optimize. That's what I have experience doing, because I was both an individual company leader many times, and then I was a group leader of companies, and that's what the role I have now. So I have 11 presidents under the businesses that I'm responsible for. And my job is to limit myself to the things I'm uniquely good at that are necessary and that no one else can do by virtue of my position and my experience. And so what I try to do in leadership is, lesson one is be myself, true to myself, my core values, as you and I have discussed, and bring to the organization that piece that is both missing and vital that you alone bring. So for example, in my life, in my business, I limit myself to these 3 or 4 things. I choose the leaders, the presidents of these companies. I help them build the strategies that will compete within their markets for those businesses. That happens to be a skill of mine. So I work with them and their senior teams to build effective, useful, powerful strategies. I approve the resources that are necessary to invest in those businesses to achieve those positions of aspiration. In other words, we aspire to achieve this position in a market, but that's going to take investment in the following areas. So I'm the guy who says, yes, we will invest those dollars, we'll invest those people, I'll get you this help. So we enable it. And then I help by aligning the goals of the ownership with the goals of the strategy and the goals of the people. So I create incentives. So I do those 4 basic things. And in the middle of that, I bring this one thing that I think I'm supposed to do. And that is strategically encourage. And what that basically means is I pick my battles, and I pick my times, and I pick my moments to insert myself. I don't micromanage. I enable. I empower. If this is not my president, I get a different president. Just being nice about it. But that's what I do. And I've done that many times. But that's not the norm. Norm is I get it in place, get a guy in place, a gal in place who really knows what they're doing here, and I just compliment, because they're more in the weeds and I'm up here at 30,000 feet. So I'm helping them see things. I'm helping them solve problems. I'm helping them face problems. I'm helping them answer the biggest questions that their businesses face, whether they're organizational or market related. So I limit myself as a leader to the things I'm good at. And isn't it interesting that God puts us in positions where that list applies to the opportunity? So if you have someone who is strategically encouraging as a gifting with business experience and leadership experience, he puts them in a position to be over 11 companies that have various kinds of problems, various kinds of investment issues, various kinds of people problems. And so I laugh today at the remarkable creativity of God to find that opportunity for me at this stage in my life in 2018, when he'd been preparing for me, helping me learn to wait and grow, appreciate, learn about forgiveness, learn about identity, be fully under authority, and plus all that experience at the same time. So what's the answer to the question? Find out who you are and be yourself, and let your opportunities emerge as God directs, and then do those things you're great at within those organizations, and your organizations will thrive. And that's really the principal message of my experience in leadership. Now, some people call me an MBA coach, some people call me a leadership coach, but I'm really use that word encouragement because I like the idea of bringing courage.
Yeah.
Because I find that most leaders are fearful. Even the really confident sounding ones, if you could really get them quiet, say, what are you scared of here? You know, I have some leaders who are highly analytical. They're really brilliant, but they have a hard time pulling the trigger and making decisions. I have others that are a little more petulant. They're scared that they're going to miss the opportunity, so they want to go forward more quickly. I try to slow those guys down. I try to speed up the other ones. So I'm complementing their compensations for fear. I'm helping them identify those issues and deal with them. I'm reassuring them when they're doing things well. I do a lot of that. A lot of these people who are experienced and are good presidents, and I have superb ones, they already know what to do, but they need me to come along and say, hey, you're right. Just do it. I'm in this with you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super powerful. And I could just sense that you knowing who you are and you knowing exactly what your highest leverage points are based on who you are makes you tremendously valuable. And I can see how, I know all the leaders listening, just knowing what are the most important things for me to bring to my organization based on my strengths, based on the way I'm wired. And you are a strategic encourager, Charlie. I've experienced that firsthand. So I want to talk about the book. So I think people have gotten a sense of you. You have such an incredible story from the very beginning where we started with this moment of forgiveness, both you forgiving your dad and you asking for forgiveness, this control, and then just the unlocking of decades of success in marriage and family, in business, and then, but all of it with a heart to give and a heart of community, a heart to pour into other people. So it's just a beautiful story. And I know it's still very much being written right now, but now I'm so excited because you've put a lot of what we've talked about, but actually we've kind of just scratched the surface today because this is a book, Throw No Rocks, that's coming out soon. It's going to come out in early September, I believe. And I'll get you, Charlie, to talk about some of the details. But I'm so excited that you have now put this in a book, and a lot of the wisdom that you've shared with me, you've put in this book, and people are going to have access to it here shortly. But talk to us about how you were able to write this book. You're a busy man. And then talk to us about where people can find the book and when it's going to be available.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share. I wrote the book. I really assembled the book from years of teaching, but predominantly the last decade where I really brought a lot of this together from the early stories, but the things I'd really worked with men on. And But it all happened really in 2023, when I was having all these muscle aches and problems, and so I was having a lot of pain, and here I am talking about a new health problem. So, but anyway, by the middle of 23, I was getting very concerned, and I went to see a doctor, and I said, "Look, this is not right," and he said, "No, that's not right." And he said, but let's get this inflammation under control. And they put me on heavy steroids while they were trying to figure out what was the underlying problem. So for about 5 to 6 months, I was on steroids. Now, I've been on steroids. I was on steroids as part of my chemotherapy model. It was my 5th drug that I would use after chemo sessions. And I know what I do on steroids, prednisone. Okay, if you give me a lot of it, I don't sleep. But I not only don't sleep, I'm 4 cups of coffee awake, alert. I'm on fire. And of course, here I am now taking 40 milligrams of prednisone a day. I'm wide awake between, solidly 1 o'clock in the morning and maybe 4 or 5, 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock every single night. No exceptions. And I'm not like, I'm awake and kind of yawning. No, I could run a marathon. I'm ready to go. And I really did the same thing I did back when the business wasn't being sold. I said, Lord, what am I supposed to do with this time? I've got all this energy. What do you want me to learn? What do you want me to do? He said, finish the book. So I went to work on boiling down. And he told me, he used one other phrase to me that came to my mind. He used this phrase, the most important things only. So I started going back and looking at all these teachings, and I got a bunch of books of teachings and, books we'd done, and we have other authors, and I'd facilitated them, and there a lot of those stories are in the book. But I started to realize that this pattern emerged. And the pattern was you put this platform in place in a partnership with Jesus, and then you get to leverage it over all these critical phases of life. And so the book is broken up that way. There's this big question. There's this compelling offer from God for partnership with Jesus. And I have a particular model I use. There's this assembling of these platform assets that give us confidence, change the way we think about problem solving. And then there's this ability to leverage this platform over transitions, prosperity, suffering and difficulty, good times and bad. And then I end it by figuring out a way to measure it. Because I'm a business guy, and I like to know if it's working, if it's not working. How would you figure it out? How would you do that with something so soft as a healthy relationship with your wife? So that's really the story. Is I got 4 hours back a night for months, and after I wrote many annoying emails to members of my staff, and it got to be a joke within the company. Like, what'd you hear at 2 a.m. last night from Charlie? And that got a little bit much, and I kind of I would be all finished with my work, and then I'd have 3.5 hours left in the middle of the night, and I started working on this and assembling it, synthesizing it, formulating it into this structure, and then of course finishing the writing. And the book it looks like this. It has this blue cover with this youthful guy throwing a rock with a baseball cap on. So it's called Throw No Rocks. It'll be available on Amazon on the 10th of September,
all right,
2024. The audiobook has been recorded. I recorded that recently, and that'll be available at the same time. There's a landing page, thrownorocks.com, which is available for pre-orders and tells you a little bit about the book. It tells you about some of these stories we talked about today. It talks about what the big idea is here, the concept of a big question, the question God is asking us about success, and if we want to partner with Him to achieve true success. And And my intention in writing the book was simply to extend the reach of my gratefulness and my overflowing heart to men because of the profound way in which I've been changed by this, if you will, platform of assets and partnership with God in positioning myself for continued success in life. And I couldn't do the book today. I'm sleeping my normal hours now, and I would just be a wreck. And I have a regular job. So it really was this window of time where I got this all back. And, I don't know how people write books and work all the time, because I don't have the energy for it. Or I don't not the energy. I don't have the ability to focus that much and not have a little bit of a little more peace. But anyway, that's the story.
Oh, that's so good. Well, Charlie, you're such a gift, and the book is excellent, and it's very practical as well. It's one of those books where, or it is a framework, and it's written specifically for men, because I know you have a heart for men. But this is meant to be something that if you're a man, you're a leader, and you're wanting to put into place this framework, you can do it. And I believe I've heard you say it before, you can do it in a matter of months. But as we've heard from multiple stories from Charlie, it's a proven way to partner with God to live out true success in life. And it's wonderfully written, tons of wonderful stories that move it along. Charlie, I want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything else just kind of on your heart to share with leaders today before we wrap up?
Well, I just, one thing comes to my heart just listening to you ask that question, and that yesterday was Blythe's my 47th anniversary.
Wow,
and
congratulations.
We were married at 22. I'm 69, and just after the Naval Academy, and Blythe is my best friend, and I talk about the marriage relationship in this book, and I tell men this. I can't tell you how many times I've used this expression when they come to me and tell me what their dream and who's in the way. And I say this to men all the time: your wife is not your problem. Mm. And they look at me like, you don't understand. She won't let me do this. I said, your wife is not your problem. Your wife may look like she's preventing you or asking you not to pursue this opportunity right now, but your wife is not your problem. You are your problem. Your wife is simply a voice saying, not now. Ignore her ignore that reality. Disengage from that reality and ask God what you should be doing right now to get ready for your dream. There's nothing wrong with your dream, and there's nothing wrong with your wife. So don't make this about your wife. And I tell men that all the time, because they say, well, my wife won't let me do this, or she doesn't want me to do this. And I said, well, God bless her, because the Lord can change your wife's mind anytime he wants. And obviously he's not ready. And I can look at him and say, you want to hear my story? I know about not being ready.
Yeah.
Listen, if Abraham needed 25 years and David needed 14, it's not that much of a reach that maybe Charlie Watkins needed 11. I mean, come on. We just are so desirous of moving quickly. So my heart, based on your question, the thing I would want to mention is your wives are your absolute most critical strategic asset in this process. And let me say it this way, they may know nothing about your business. That actually makes them more valuable, not less, because they can pray with total unbiased freedom. And if anybody wants your best in life, it's the woman who loves you. So I tell men that all the time. Fall in love with your wife. Again, do it at your 7th anniversary. Do it at your 10th. Invest in your marriage relationship. 1 Peter 3:7, the Bible says your prayers will go unhindered if you love your wife the way Christ loved the church. So I have a section in there on relationships and bringing our relationships to God, but I basically focus on the marriage relationship because success in marriage, and I know I'm talking to men who are divorced, and I'm saying there's forgiveness and let's move on. But those men who are in the middle, and I know a bunch of them right now are in the middle of it, thinking about divorce, and they're not happy in their marriage. And I would say, fight for your wife, fight for your marriage. Be serious about this. Be a man about this. If you get this right, God will honor it. And so marriage is a big deal, and it's a big deal to God because it's the image of Christ in the church. And so it is an imperative. I call it all these 7 things, strategic imperatives in the book. It's an imperative as a no-brainer because it's the model of Christ and his love for the church, his love for his own people. So that would be the thing on my heart that we didn't talk about today that is so essential besides identity and understanding spiritual warfare and bringing your resources to God and the time you spend with God every day and the way you deal with your money and all these things that are not, they're finite. It's a list. It's a good to-do list. Men love to-do lists.
Yeah.
My father-in-law used to carry, he was an Army general. You'd love this. He's a 4-star Army general. He used to carry a 3x5 card in his pocket with a pen. And he lived by that 3x5 card. And, he was just a to-do list guy. And, I am too. I like, sometimes secretly I would tell you, I write things on the list after I've done them so I can check them off and so I can feel good about myself. But that's a different issue for a different podcast.
I think there's a lot of leaders that can relate to that 100%. And just as you were talking about, just the partnering with your spouse, it just made me think back even to that example I was mentioning of just like with this podcast, needing to step back. My wife was kind of hinting at that to me. I just wasn't able to listen. But certainly reflecting back when I did take a step away and just kind of did some important work, I clearly looked back and it was just a great reminder of how wise my wife is and just what a gift she is to me, and that I need to remain open to listening and to listening to the wisdom that God often brings through her. So, well, Charlie, thank you so much for investing so much of your time today in this audience. I know that many people have benefited from your story, from your conversation, and I'm just so excited that the book is shortly coming out. So please, folks, go over to thrownorocks.com, get the book, pre-order it. And Charlie, thanks again for meeting with me today. This was wonderful.
It's really been my pleasure. Couldn't be more excited for this message, and thank you, and bless your continued work on this interesting and wonderful podcast.
Well, friend, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Charlie Watkins. I highly encourage you to go over to Amazon and pick up his book, Throw No Rocks. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone you know. I am just so grateful for you. I'm thankful that you spent some time with me. I'm thankful that you're investing in your leadership, because we know that when the leader gets better, lives get better. I hope you go and have a wonderful day, wonderful week. And again, thank you so much for being here. Remember that life is short. Let's go make it count.